here. We're here.
Yeah. Hey, I've been thinking about you and enjoying your post. Good to see you. Looks like we've got a lot more people coming in here. So let's go ahead and fire up that chat. So we want everybody to figure out where that chat button is. Thank you, Sue, for kicking us off. I appreciate that. She's always such a
My
trooper for
friend
us, right?
Sue.
Everybody loves Sue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, we've got there's Kurt.
Oh,
I see some people I know here and some new names.
oh,
So
my buddy
welcome
Kyle.
everybody.
It's always
Dream
great seeing
team right here.
friends
Oh,
pop on.
Kyle, that was sweet. So I think we do make a pretty good team.
I think so too.
Yeah. So if anybody is someone who if you're one of our regulars coming on the program, you're going, wait a minute, Kimberly, that background looks a little different. It definitely is. This is the first head-to-head that I'm doing from the road. So coming to you live from New Hampshire today. I'm in just outside of lovely Keene, New Hampshire with one of my clients this week. We're doing some training up here. And they are off-site construction. So it's just so much fun. True artisans up here. My inner builder geek, Corey, is like totally freaking out. So I'm sitting in their design center. They were gracious enough to give us a little break today to let me do this. Hey, Linda, I see Linda on there. You seeing some peeps to shout out to there,
Yeah,
Corey?
absolutely. I see my buddy Kyle. I agree, Kyle. Dream team. This is one of the things that I wanted to do when I first started this journey was I wanted to be on head to head with Kimberly, and look at who we are, full circle. So really excited about that. Oh, my buddy Eric's on here too. Good times.
Yeah. And thank you for your flexibility with it too, because I had planned to ask you to come to the November one and ended up having a conflict. So flipped the September and the November one. So Magda Asola is going to be joining me in November. You've heard it here first, people. So if you haven't heard the one and only Magda Asola and her story, it is a true inspiration. If you need a shot in the arm of pure adrenaline and love and abundance, that's the program, man. It really is inspiring. Hey, Whitney, good to see you. So all right, well, we've got a good group starting off here, and I know that more people will join us. It's always weird with these things. You never know who's going to join live and who's gonna just listen to it when it comes out. But again, fire up that chat. This is interactive, and we're going to do things a little differently here. So some of the stuff that I normally do, because I cheat and have slides, we're going to actually do in post-production because of being on the road for sure. So head to head, for those of you who are new to the program, is not a webinar and it's not a podcast. It's a discussion. And I always bring or it's me with another industry expert, and we do a deep dive into a topic. We invite you to be part of the conversation. So you are not interrupting. So, fire up that chat, ask us your questions, react to us. We need to know. We don't like to just sit here in a room by ourselves, right? So Corey's in Orlando, Florida, or just outside Orlando, Florida, and here I am all the way up in New Hampshire. So the power of technology brings
Oh
us
man, what a
together.
time to be alive.
Yeah, exactly. So Whitney's
Oh,
excited to
thanks,
hear from
Whitney.
you. So me too, me too. He's our own industry superhero. So this is a fantastic topic for us
I
today.
live the gimmick, as they say. I live the gimmick.
That's great. So a little bit about me, and then I'll turn it over to Corey to tell you all about him and his story. As most of you know, my company is New Home Solutions Consulting. I will make sure that I put in the show notes and everything how to reach out to me, how to get a hold of Corey, and our websites. But I like to say that New Home Solutions is the company that you call when you want to make sure that sales is the engine that drives the train rather than running it off the tracks. So what I mean by that is not only do I do the sales training and the speaking, but I do immersion consulting, and I look at your systems, your production, your KPIs. Are we measuring those right things that are going to allow us to have predictable and profitable sales? So if I can help you with any of that, please feel free to give me a call. So enough about me. Let's get to the man of the hour here. Corey, tell us about yourself and a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so it's funny. We do have a good bit of overlap there. So I also talk about sales. I talk about leadership as well. I have a company called the Superhero Mindset. I forgot my cape today, unfortunately, but next time we'll make sure we're ready for it. But I love to talk about sales, but I love to talk about the mindset behind really great salespeople and really great leaders. And I've learned over time it really comes down to mindset. That is the difference from good to great. So I spent a lot of time talking about mindset. And it started with my own journey of kind of working my way through my own mindset. And, I'm what they would call now an ADHD baby. And I was the one that was bouncing off the walls and had a lot of trouble with teachers and couldn't really figure out how to get into a groove. And it put me in this place where I created an alter ego. What I love about sales is sales let me bring my alter ego to the forefront every day. And then obviously what we do as well today, Kimberly, is I get to live in that alter ego all the time. My goal is to help make that alter ego the norm and make that the one that shows up all the time. So I talk a lot about that and I make sure that we're all in the position to not only be the best version of ourselves, but also bring the best of what we have to the world, which I consider purpose. So I'm excited to share this time with you and have a good chat.
And I just have to point out, like the photo in the background there is just so strategically placed to give you the crown and the mane. I mean, it's glorious.
It's pure ego, Kimberly. I'm gonna be honest with you, it's pure ego. If I'm feeling down, I look up and I'm like, oh well, I'm wearing a crown, so how can I be upset about that?
Exactly. And we all need to polish those crowns off every once in a while, right? So we all deserve them. I love that.
And I think I look good
So
with a mane also.
I agree. I totally agree. All right, well, we have a lot to discuss, so let's dive into this because we promised people that that we would figure out what their sales superpower is. So some of you may know. So if you know what your superpower is, like get that chat fired up. We want to hear from you. What is your superpower? But we decided to start off on what might be considered a more, well, I'm going to do air quotes here, negative attribute, right?
Mhm.
And how we can turn that into, and then we wanted to end on a positive note. So we'll dive into some of the more positive attributes that are necessary for sales, but also then what do you do with them? I think that's part of the problem. I this morning I had the blessing of being able to work with a team and do their disc profiles. So we were looking at those personality behavioral profiles and as people are really starting to have some introspection about how they communicate and present themselves to the world so that they can figure out other people and communicate in a way where we can reduce the noise, right? So just even having that and knowing a little bit about oneself and knowing that we have a tendency to tend toward whatever, fill in the blank, right, is I think very important. So let's Eric's kicking us off here with self-awareness and choice is his superpower. I like that.
I
So
love it. Eric and
we
I come
can
from the same school of thought, so I think that those are the two that we all have. The challenge is we don't always use those superpowers that we have. So I love to see Eric starting us off with those two.
So, and we talked about as we were talking yesterday, and we were getting prepared. A little bit about your story and the ADHD that you talked about, and so I mean that could be negative, right? Because bright shiny object, right? And so many salespeople have this. We're easily distracted. We've always got 100 balls in the air. We're always juggling lots of balls. So let's talk about that and dive into that and share your personal journey with that if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I was, ADHD before it was cool. Before it's kind of like everybody has it now, but I was one of the ones that was like, I guess, a test case. So they really didn't know what to do with me when I was in school, and I got in trouble all the time. Still to this day, my dad goes around town, and people that used to work at the school know him by name, like, "Hey, Mr. Charles," and it's like super embarrassing because I just lived in the office because not because I was a terrible kid, but I talked a lot and I was always asking one too many questions of my teachers and I was ridiculously curious and I just had a ton of energy and there was nowhere to put that energy. There was nowhere to put all that excitement. So it led to me kind of acting up in class. But
Hmm.
what happened is it's interesting because it created this space for me where I understood here's who I have to be to get through a day of school successfully. Even though it's not me, this is the person I need to be just to get through a day without getting in trouble. And it created kind of these two battling personalities. So I joke around a lot. Sometimes you'll see me go wildly from one end to the other end, where I'm super excited and animated, especially if you see me on stage. And then I'll go to very introverted, which is kind of more of more of a natural personality because it created these two different spaces. And again, like I said, what I love about sales, when I found sales, it gave me the freedom to really be that version of me, the version of me that was told to be quiet and sit down, don't do that, don't say that, you can't do that. That opened up the door to me to be that person that's really me, and bring that to the world and turn those things that were challenges, were struggles, were, I would call them kryptonites. They were actually superpowers in disguise. I just had to figure out, you said it perfectly, how to harness those attributes, we'll call them, how to harness them in a positive way that can help me move forward. And it actually fed perfectly into my sales career, being able to tap into those things. And that's why I'm so focused on helping other people find those things that are special about them that they can tap into. Once we can tap into it and get into flow and turn that thing on like a light switch, ooh, we're cooking.
It's a shame, I think, that we try to funnel kids that there's only one way to
Mhm.
be. So having raised kids that were totally opposite from one another, so my son far more like you. I literally went to middle school and shadowed him one day because the teachers were telling me how disruptive he was. Of course, he was on his best behavior that day.
He
So
learned earlier than I did.
yeah, but I often this is not a bad kid. You're just not reaching him, or you reached him 10 minutes ago and now he's bored with it, right?
Mhm.
Because his intelligence level was so quick that he got the concept. So, I mean, and that's unfortunate because I think there are so many different lanes. One of the conversations I was having with people this morning is, people think that that high promoter or that high influencer is the best salesperson. And I'm like, no, there is no best salesperson. You can be any of the different personality profiles as your primary and be successful in selling.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
and some of my best have been more of that controller personality, right? That analytical. Because 25% of the population are analyticals. So, who better to deal with an analytical than an analytical, as long as they don't get analysis paralysis? We just need to
Exactly.
be aware of it.
Well, it's funny because
So,
I see it all the time with salespeople. Sometimes we camp in our own personality type so much and so deeply that we freeze when other personality types are approaching us, when we're dealing with other people that are analytical and we're not that way. Sometimes we freeze because it's not our own personality type. And we need to accept all of them and understand how we work with all the different personality types and how we can make these conversations go smooth and how we can get to a place of understanding with everyone, right?
yeah, absolutely. And as I was sharing with you yesterday, I mean, I'm a woman raised in the South. I'm from Tennessee, for those of you who didn't know originally, and I can start talking like that if you want me to. So I
That
I
was
can do
good.
that. I can go straight into that Tennessee accent that I grew up with. But as a strong woman with opinions and a brain, and not that Southern women are not strong, because trust me, Southern women are some of the strongest women on the planet. But there was a behavior that I was required, you're so pretty, just be pretty. Don't speak. When you're told this as a child, again, so these lanes, and for me to find that path for me that made sense to be able to embrace some of my attributes. And it wasn't always an easy path, right? It's dealing with division presidents as a challenging vice president of sales. They oftentimes, wait, you're a woman. What do you know? I
Mhm.
mean, literally had people say that to me,
Sadly,
which
I
is a
believe that.
shame, and does it matter what gender I know? Of course, it doesn't matter. It matters what can I do, right? How can I help you? But that wasn't always well received. And it did take some time. It did take some time for me to carve out that niche for myself, and create something which is my business, right? I get to do both things. I get to do that consulting and that really show off those smarts, right? But I also then get to have a little bit of fun and the sales part of it and do the training and the speaking, which is, you know, certainly very ego driven, but it's also, you know, it's energizing. It is a lot of fun. So I'm looking, we have a bunch of comments coming in. Tenacious. Somebody is, I love
That's a
tenacity.
good one.
It is a very good one. So strong salespeople are curious salespeople and they are tenacious.
That's
So
right.
yes.
But again,
And
it's
tenacious can be both, right? It can be
yeah.
both good and bad.
But it's one of
So
those things where, we talked about it earlier. It's one of those qualities that we kind of frown upon when it comes to kids. And interesting. So my middle child, I have three boys, and my middle son is a clone of me. My parents say that's what I deserve. And he is literally a clone of me. And for me, it's trying to not quiet that side of his brain because I know it's really powerful. So when I hear things like tenacious, I'm like, yeah, that's a good thing. And I need to condition him to think it's a good thing and not see it as a negative, or the fact that he's insanely curious. I mean, you talk about three wise deep, he's like 90 wise down the road, and that's a good thing. I want that. I want to really empower him to think that way, within the box that we need him to live in for a little bit, but I want to make sure that he absolutely taps into that anytime, because that's the difference, I think.
and that that goes into our grit and resilience and
Mhm.
tenacity and and certainly not a fear of no. And I see resilience down here. So and I should have known. Yes, at some point we were going to have to quote Charles Clark III.
Yeah,
That's talk
eyebrows.
about bulls, lambs, and tigers, which of course is the DISC program for those of you who hear us talking about DISC. But when you put animals to it, it makes it easier for people to remember them. So
Especially for tigers
yeah,
like me.
definitely. And and so important, and it was revolutionary for our industry to have people start to talk about this and then allow them to be able to identify maybe what their prospects are and their customers are so that they can do a better job communicating. Too often, I think people got a little distracted with what animal they were, right? Uh, but, Kurt, yes, very good point. Let's some of these attributes that we talked about out there and just see how people feel about that. So perfectionism, this is something that I see
Mhm.
oftentimes, particularly if I have someone who tends to be on that steady or controller side, that analytical or the steady. They tend to want everything to be perfect, right?
Mhm.
So that can be a negative attribute, but it can also be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, it can pop up in a lot of different ways. My son being one of these, where he's an artist and he'll draw something, and if one line is out of place, Kimberly, I'll hear the paper get crumbled up, and he'll just, throw it away. And I'm like, no, we have to process through that. Just because it's not perfect doesn't mean it's not good. So, sometimes that can pop up in different ways. But how do we harness that and use that instead of as perfectionism? How do we use that as high standards? How do we make sure that you want high quality in your work, and that's okay, but also it comes with practice, it comes with work, it comes with effort, and we can't just give up if it's not exactly the way we want it. It has to be a tool for us to learn and get better and grow from whatever task we're doing.
Think it's important for perfectionists to not compare themselves to others,
Mm.
but compare themselves to their best version of
Oh,
themselves or
so
their
good.
vision for themselves. So, and Whitney, I'm going to throw I'm wearing my Grace bracelet that Whitney gave me at the International Builder Show. I wear it every day to remind me to have some grace with myself, and to have grace with others, but particularly for myself, because I tend to be very hard on myself and I do have very high expectations. And I think as a perfectionist, that's something that if that's a tendency that you identify with, have some grace.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
such
you're
a
not
great
going to hit
lesson.
it out of the park every single time. It's not going to happen. You're not going to make every sale. You're not going to, every phone call is not going to be just met with, oh, it's happy to hear from you. Yeah, those are that's very unrealistic. So I think when we can put some of the realism back into it, but still shoot for, it's okay to have high standards for yourself, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny. I have the greatest mentor in the world, Abby Murata, and I used to every time I left
Oh,
the
Abby's
stage,
fantastic.
isn't she great? Every time I left the stage, she'd ask me, how do you feel?" And I, for years, it was terrible. It was this, it was that, because I, like you, was not very good at giving myself grace. And she taught me that, hey, listen, it's not always going to be perfect, and use it as your fuel to get better, but also celebrate the wins. And when it's good, it's good, and be happy about what you did. First of all, what we do is not easy. And I think we need to remember that for starters. A lot of people
Right.
can't do what we do. But also, we have to be willing to take a step back and say, while I don't think it was perfect, I think it was very good. And there's something to grow off of from that.
We can learn. You can always learn. And when things don't work out as planned, that is often life's best teacher. So
Hmm.
reflect, learn from it, and remember, I mean, growth happens when you are outside of your comfort zone. If you are too comfortable, you are not growing. So remember that, and definitely give yourself some grace with it. So that perfectionism, without a doubt, is we are too hard on ourselves sometimes, and it's more important to be learning than to be right 100% of the time.
So true. So true. Oh man, if you didn't write that down, you need to write that down.
Wow. See, I said something profound. I can go home now. Wait, no, I have a
No,
whole
you're
verse
not
right
going
out
home
here
right
that I
now.
have to keep teaching, right? Yeah. Oh boy, I identify with this one. Impatience. Anybody out there impatient besides me? Am I? Oh, jeez.
Bouncing off the walls.
Yeah. The chat's going to start going nuts, right? Yeah. So we're all impatient. So how can we turn impatience into a superpower? What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, I think, with impatience, it's something, number one, I think a lot of us face. And I think, especially knowing what the outcome is, we want to get there quicker. But I think if we look at impatience and kind of shifts our mindset on impatient, and making sure that it helps us move towards more efficiency, and making sure that the results, even though that's what we're looking for, let's make sure the results are exactly what we want, make sure they're correct results, because sometimes that impatience will lead us to incorrect results. So it's okay to want to move faster towards it, but it's got to be faster with the right steps, if that makes sense. A lot of times we run really fast, but in the wrong direction. So we got to just sometimes, even if it's taken a beat to really understand which direction I'm going and which steps do I need to take, then we can put ourselves in a position to move a little bit further. But I think it's more about making sure that we're efficient in our processes and efficient in the steps that we're taking.
Yeah, sometimes we have to slow down to go fast.
Amen.
And that's hard for a lot of people. I work with a really fantastic salesperson. He does not get a lot of leads. So he is in a market where it is a tight market. He gets very few leads, but his conversion ratio is just phenomenal. Just absolutely phenomenal. So he's about 35 to 40% conversion. Like so, but with that, he sometimes forgets to
Hmm.
slow down. So he'll burn through. And I'm like, we can't afford to burn through leads when we're only getting 3 leads a week. Yeah, they take a little bit more work, but he wants to go straight for that close, right? And so I think that can be a negative with as because we do want to get straight to that close, and we don't want to slow down to speed up. And slowing down and building that relationship and relationship based selling is key. We're not selling cars. We're not selling widgets.
So true.
So spending that time. So impatience is good because it's an energy. It's an urgency that you have. Don't ever lose that. That is so, valuable, because the opposite end of that can really just drag the sales process out indefinitely, and you'll lose people because you don't have that sense of urgency. So keep the urgency, but slow down a little bit in the beginning. Don't be impatient with really spending the time to get to know people. One of the exercises that I often give people is, let's do a little role play, and I want you to go at least 3 minutes before you start talking about product. 3 minutes.
I know some
This
people are
is,
crawling in their skin when they hear that.
oh my gosh, it's really hard for a lot of people, right? So they can't do it. They want to talk about product right out of the gate. And we have to break that cycle and spend more time. And people say, well, how much more time? I don't know. there's no magic one size, right? So, I mean, literally one day I spent 45 minutes standing in a kitchen talking to people about Harley Davidson motorcycles. Like, and if I hadn't done that, we were never going to get the sale. And I don't know a whole lot about Harleys. So that's a story for another time. But, you know, my impatient trainee was kicking me going, let's move on. Let's move on. We only have one floor plan that meets the criteria here. But, you know, the wife wasn't ready to buy, even though the husband wanted to buy it. And if we didn't get both of them on board, it ain't happening.
Well, you know what's really interesting is sometimes we fail to quantify the impact of impatience. And it's a lot of times when we are impatient, especially when you talk about the sales process, is we miss that one little key detail, that one micro moment in the conversation that sends us down a totally different path. And we miss it because of impatience. And we get to the end of the process and we go to ourselves, what happened? How did this go sideways? How did how did this not land? And it's just like, the golf ball analogy is if you hit a golf ball just a degree off, it's going to end up 500 yards in the wrong direction. If I miss a small detail, a small little micro moment, a piece of information that the person I'm talking to gives me, it's going to send me down a totally different path because I was impatient. I missed something and I kept going down my own script and I missed exactly what I needed to hear. And that's where we get to this place of how did this go so sideways when it felt so good in the beginning? And that's where your point is so great, Kimberly, is so we got to slow down sometimes. And that's going to allow us to speed up.
Yeah, but the positive of it is you have that urgency. Keep your urgency, just control it. Channel that
Control it.
urgency. Let's channel it. That's the word we're looking for,
Controlled
right?
urgency.
Yes. Our next attribute is a little controversial.
Ooh.
So I'm very curious to hear your take on this, but how about overconfidence? What do we think about and audience, please chime in. What do you think about overconfidence?
It's interesting. I think that's one of those ones where you're right. It is controversial because the school of thought has told us for 100 years, maybe more, that you need to be overly confident, especially in sales. You need to be that big personality. I don't know that that works anymore. I think it turns people off in a lot of ways, and I even see it in our shoes, as well as trainers and coaches. There are trainers and coaches that will stand up there and tell you for an hour how awesome they are and all the
Yeah.
things that they did great. And I've been with you before, and you've seen me as well. I typically talk more about the mistakes that I've made than the successes because I think we can learn from those as well. I don't know that we need to be overly confident. Confident, yes. But
Yes.
there's a big difference between confident and overly confident. Confidence can make us feel sure of ourselves, can lead to that assertiveness that you talked about, that can help us go in a path confidently and strongly, but it doesn't cross over to that line of overconfidence, which let's be honest is kind of a cousin to arrogance, which no one likes. No one likes arrogance. So I think we have to be really careful, kind of metering where we are on that scale. And if we start to tip into that overconfidence, usually the universe will, reality check you. But if it doesn't, I suggest having good people around you, or at least having a good way to understand if you're not in the right spot.
Yeah, that's where that self-awareness really comes
Yes.
in because oftentimes when I see people who are overconfident, and we see them in our political world right now, right? We see some and some people because of their business acumen or that sort of thing. When you get to the point that you lose that reality check, and it usually here's statistically, this usually comes from a place of not having confidence. It's underconfidence
Hmm.
actually, and it's trying to overcompensate for
Oh,
that.
there it is.
There we go. We're going to go a little deep. See, yeah. So, being confident, there are things that you can do to help your confidence. I'm working with a lovely young woman right now who, when she came to me fresh out of college, wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do within the company. And just, I mean, she's just a sweet, beautiful, smart human being, but she didn't have the confidence that went along with that. So there are things that you can do and exercise standing up straight, taking up a little more space in the room, projecting from your diaphragm, projecting your voice that can help you get to a place doing your homework, like knowing your stuff, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm peeking over the chat. Eric just dropped a gem. He said, it depends. He's highly confident in the product and that it will improve your life, but he has to get an understanding first of your situation and why you're interested in a new home. I think that's such a great insight because I think we should be confident in what we have to offer. But where we
Absolutely.
want to make sure we are operating from the right space is that we understand the person that we're talking to on a really deep level. And that's going to, again, feel that confidence, not overconfidence. Overconfidence gets you in trouble sometimes.
Yes, it does. Yes. So, but definitely knowing your product inside and out. And like you said, Eric, spot on. So, but how does that benefit the person that's there in front of you? Figuratively or literally, how does it help them? Because how it helps them is very personal to them. So we can have the best product all day long, but it might not be the right product for you or me or whoever that is. So we have to spend the time to find out what's important to them. And that's the key. That's where that slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, as salespeople, sometimes we have trainers come in from different products that we're offering. So, and the late great Bill Herring told me one time, and I mean, I was brand new, fresh out of the gate, and he just hit me between the eyes. So he's like, Kimberly, round robin, really fast, rapid. He goes, what's the best thing about your product? And I just launch into this whole like, blah, 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 blah. We have this on cue thing, and it's the wave of the future. And, homes of the future are going to have blah, 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 blah. And I just like regurgitate all this stuff everywhere. Right. And he looks at me and he crossed his arms and leaned back and he said, so what?
Mhm.
Now my managers in the back were like, yes, she gets it. We just invested all this money and all this in this technology for these homes. And, she's out there, she's selling it. And he's like, so what? He had to do that to me twice, but I learned it. Sometimes I'm a little slow in the uptake, right? But I learned it. So what was important to him? So it doesn't matter what I think the best feature of our home is. Doesn't matter what I think the worst feature of the home is. Does
That part,
not
yes.
matter. It's what matters to them.
Yes. And we sometimes go on both ends. I think it's not always the things that we love. Sometimes we have a blind spot for things that we don't like about the home because no home's perfect, right? I think sometimes there are things we don't love about the home and we sell to that of, hey, I don't like this. And it changes the way that we approach the conversation. We have to remove our own feelings from what we're selling because it is about the buyer. It's about what is important to them, what's going to impact their lives. My feelings have to be taken out of it completely. So that's a great point because I think we have to watch it on both ends of the spectrum there.
Yes. You do have to be aware of your own internal objections because sometimes those are the hardest ones to overcome. So, all right, we're going to move on because we could do an entire session on just
Seriously.
that. Yeah, right. So, how about emotional reactivity?
Emotional reactive. So going back to my 9-year-old, I often say he's 50 pounds of emotion in a 45-pound bag because he is just overflowing at all times. But, understanding that, that is a doorway, that's an opening to high emotional intelligence. It's a doorway to connecting you empathetically to someone because you feel those emotions at such a high level. You can take a step back and really understand when someone's telling you what they're going through, what they're feeling, what they're stressed about. You can really feel it on a deeper level than sometimes a lot of other people can. So it absolutely can be a superpower, just like all is, as long as we understand how to harness that power. I tell people that I want to be here when it comes to my emotions. I want to be able to stay, as
In
Bruce Lee
that
would say,
neutral zone. Yeah.
yeah, Bruce Lee would say, I'm like water, right? So I want to be like water, but I also have the ability to tap into those higher emotions if I need it to connect to someone on a deeper level, or if I need it to bring something out of me. I have those gears, but typically I want to stay right here. So I think it's a huge positive. We just have to really understand how to harness it.
Yeah, when I got out of day-to-day like sales, the frontline sales, and went into leadership, my boss asked me, he was like, why do you're such a great salesperson. Why do you want to leave sales? And I'm like, and that was really the reason. I was like, this is emotionally too much for me in this position because, people just like they think of me as their marriage counselor. They're sitting down in my desk and telling me all this stuff throughout the build process. And, the emotions for me to keep my emotions in check took a lot of energy. And I'm like, I really need to be arm's length from this. So now I just get to go back and do it where it's fun. So,
Well,
I get the best of both worlds
well,
now.
we're salespeople, we're therapists, we're marriage counselors, we're babysitters, we're
Yes.
design experts. We wear a lot of hats, especially on the
We
sales.
wear a lot of hats.
And
Yes.
it does, yeah, like you said, it drains. It takes a lot of energy to, especially if that's not your natural state. It takes a lot of energy to get there and stay there consistently. It definitely is a lot of work.
Yes, for without a doubt. And but if we can separate ourselves from our emotion, and that's hard. That's something
Yes.
that's we can talk about this all day, right? But truly doing it in the heat of the moment, that's hard. And especially because we do spend so much time getting to know these people and really understanding the value of what we're doing for them and with them. I think that can be a very hard thing. But I think it's so important to be able to empathize without allowing yourself to go down that rabbit hole of
Yes.
having that emotion with them. So
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to get out of that rabbit hole if we go down too far. So definitely being aware of, where am I at in this situation? Am I kind of committing too much energy to it myself? Because it's not my situation. I just want to understand where they're coming from, but I don't need to necessarily live in it with them, right?
right, right. Well, you can't help them because it's a forest for the trees scenario, and
Mhm.
you're if we're going to continue our rabbit hole analogy, you're drinking the potion that makes you too big or too small, and your
That's right.
perspective is all off, right?
That's
So
good. Good
definitely.
analogy.
You can learn so much from Alice in
I
Wonderland. Like
love
it's a good one.
it.
Let's talk about introversion. So oftentimes we think introverts can't be great salespeople.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the thing that, I've been fighting this narrative most of my career. I've been, especially, post sales, I've been trying to be a champion for the introverts out there because I think introverts are fantastic salespeople. Again, once we understand, what are your strengths, how can we harness what you do naturally and bring that to the light? I talked about earlier how, my upbringing created these two separate personalities. One is very much the superhero personality, and then one is the introverted me, right? So I go from one extreme to the next, and as an introvert, I was told all the time that I was never going to be great at sales. Unless you tapped into that guy, you're never going to make it in sales. And it puts you kind of on an island sometimes because your peers usually aren't introverts, or they're good at hiding it. Your leaders aren't introverts, right? So it puts you in this weird spot where you don't have a lot of resources. I remember not a ton of books, not a ton of training materials that spoke to introverts. Everything spoke to those kind of over the top personalities. So for me, it was really important understanding that as an introvert, yes, I may not be always over the top, but it allows me the ability to get in deep with people and really make strong connections and really build on that one-on-one connection and really build on those conversations and focusing in on that one person and then tapping into the superhero when I need him to, but really understanding that introverts are phenomenal salespeople because they can really, we talked about it earlier, hyper focus on things that are important, especially things that they're passionate about. They can really dive in and get some ton of great information.
A lot of great salespeople are. Sue asked to talk about the relationship between the extrovert and the introvert. And if you've ever taken a Myers-Briggs personality profile, that will give you a lot of information, and it's really about where your energy comes from.
Mhm.
So a lot of people, a lot more people than acknowledge it, are on the more introverted scale. And I usually say, if you need to go home and recharge your batteries without people around, like being out in a large social setting or going to concerts, or if those things you find physically draining, then you may fall a little more on the introverted side of things. So, but and an extrovert, they need to be their life of the party. Like they get their energy from going to those things. They love to be out with the crowds. They love to be part of the party. They like to be in large groups. They love the energy and that they find that energy very contagious. So it's more to me about where your energy
Mm.
comes from. And it's often very surprising to people. And Corey and I had this conversation one day, and where were we? Mount Dora? No, Claremont.
Claremont. Yep.
Claremont, we met and had a lovely conversation about both of us being, really introverts. So, I go do what I do and I love what I do and I love making those connections, particularly on that one-on-one when I can see that light bulb going off. But then I got to go home and recharge the batteries.
Hmm.
So the International Builder Show is the most exhausting,
Oh,
intensive thing that I do all year long. So for me, it's 7 days because I am involved at the National Association of Home Builders level. So it's 7 days of just intensive being out there. So I've learned some coping mechanisms to get through it and keep my energy high because I've been doing it for so long.
I love that you said that though, was learning the coping mechanisms and learning what, because I think it's different for everyone, right? And I love that you talked about that, learning, hey, this is what works for me, and this is how I recharge. So I'm kind of in that weird gray area because I love doing those things, but like you, man, I crash after. And that was kind of the running joke in my previous life was, we would typically train Monday through Thursday, and Friday was like, don't call Corey because Friday he's checked out because he went as
He's
hard as he
done. Yeah.
could. Yeah, Monday through Thursday, he gave everything, and Friday, he is just fried, absolutely fried. So I think it's understanding, even if you need to make it in a pinch and get a quick recharge, is it music? Is it talking to a friend? Is it, reading a chapter out of a book that you love? Is it listening to a podcast? What is the thing that can recharge you quickly if maybe you don't have the time to fully shut down? It's how can I get my energy back to get through what I need to get through? But knowing that about yourself, I think is really important. Going back to what Eric said, that self-awareness is huge, huge.
One of the things, and I didn't get the opportunity to appreciate them, but we at the International Builder Show, there are actually pods available for people, quiet pods where you can go and you can like take a break from it all because it can be so much for a lot of people and overstimulating. So,
I will be using them this year.
it'd be nice if we had quiet pods everywhere, right? Wouldn't that be a lovely thing? So, but as an introvert, the superpower part of being an introvert is your ability to make one-on-one connections.
Yeah,
And instead of getting your energy from being life of the party and chaos and all, it's more that quiet and that ability to bring people to the quiet with you so they can think and be clear and feel the calm as they're trying to make a big decision, which purchasing a home is a very big decision. I think
absolutely.
most of us would agree.
Absolutely. It's interesting because while the extrovert typically is going to make the friend really quick, they're going to connect really quick with someone. The introvert is maybe they won't connect on that level. Maybe they won't talk about, their favorite sports teams right off the bat, but they'll get deeper with them quicker and they'll be able to get into real conversations because like you said, that one-on-one connection is there typically a lot earlier with the introvert versus the extrovert. So they're both great sides of the coin to have. It's just
Yeah.
understanding which side you're on and how to maximize what you already have.
Yeah, if that's you, then yeah, that is your super. So like lean into it. That's really, lean into whatever these attributes are. All right, here's one that we might have to work a little bit to get there on this one, but how about resistance to change?
Oh man, I think number one, we're in an industry that sees change often, and I think we've seen a lot of change even the last 3 years. It feels like change happens all the time, but your ability to roll through that, the resistance, the ability to look at change and challenges as a good thing, opportunities to grow, opportunities to get better. I think that's really important. So the mindset behind what the change is and what the change can do, I think is great, but also understanding that the change whether it's good or bad, I think we have to remove that thought process from our head. The change is going to happen. The change is what it is. The opportunity is to make the best of the change. And that's where we have to get, you said it perfectly earlier, we have to get past our feelings on the change and get to a place of clarity on the change. Here's the change. Here's how I can make it work in my favor. Here's how, great example. We all remember the global pandy. I won't say the name of it anymore, but we all remember that thing that
That's
happened.
so in our rearview mirror now.
Yeah, I don't even want to talk about that thing anymore, but we all remember that, when that first hit, it was pure panic, right? Obviously for the health reasons, but thinking about our industry, there's pure panic of how are people going to buy homes? How are we going to sell? What does this mean? The world's going to collapse, right? And look at all the great things that happened through that. Number one,
It
salespeople
forced
learned
us to change.
for sure. We didn't have a
Yeah.
choice. And look at the things that we're doing now, like a Zoom call that we may have known about them before, but we didn't do them, not to the level we do them today. We're on Zoom calls. I don't know about you. I'm on Zoom calls most of my week.
I
Just
say
just
I've
a
been
normal
Zooming since before Zoom was cool. So
it's
yeah.
just a normal part of business. I saw great salespeople learn how to get in and out of a conversation and really get buyers to understand what they were looking at without looking at what they're looking at, right? That's a skill they had to learn because of the change.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes the change, not sometimes, most of the time, the change pushes us into a place of discomfort. But discomfort's a good thing. Discomfort is where we grow. And I think
It
we
is where
just
we
need to
are.
have that look. We need to have that feel of, hey, okay, this has changed. It's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but I'm going to get better from it. And I'm going to learn something and I'm going to grow and I'm going to get a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic is literally how I started doing these programs, like, because we weren't on the road anymore. We weren't doing, so everything changed and everybody was in panic mode and looking for guidance. And so that's, yeah, it did force a change for sure. Fear of rejection. We definitely need to touch on that one. What do you think about fear of rejection? That's a big one.
It's a big one. And I'm always so fascinated about that word, the fear of rejection, especially when we come to when we talk about sales. It's, that fear of rejection, such a powerful word, first of all, rejection. I always want to remind salespeople that they're not rejecting you. Something doesn't work with the product, right? Or the situation, but they're not rejecting you. But if we're talking about some of these personalities that we've talked about before, it feels like a personal rejection. And what's the challenge there is when we feel that our own our own personality is at stake, that rejection of us is at stake, it causes us to freeze typically. And we won't take the risk of asking the question or doing the thing because we're afraid of getting rejected as people. And I always try to caution salespeople, they're not rejecting you as a person. Something just doesn't work in the situation. So we have to see through that. But that rejection, that fear of rejection has to be the thing that forces you to ask the questions. It's got to be the thing that forces you to handle the objection, take it head on and really have that conversation because that's only going to get you closer to, as Eric said earlier, get you closer to that full and true understanding. And that's where we're going to be able to get to a good place. Again, it's not about rejecting me. It's about something doesn't work in the situation. How do we get to that? We got to ask questions.
Word no is it's two letters. It's no. Like we're so afraid of this word, right? And we don't need to be afraid of the word no. No is nothing more than somebody has some questions.
Yep.
And it may be that ultimately it ends up being a no, but we should explore it. We hear no and we go, oh, we play bumper cars, right? We start running in the other direction instead of taking time to really explore it and find out the why behind it.
Yep.
And, so what we're really trying to get to is what we have a benefit and a help to this buyer. And if it is, then let's figure out how to make that happen. And if it isn't, let's part as friends and, maybe refer them to something that we think might be a better fit for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we understand that, it's all part of that understanding and making sure that I get a real good feel. And, we talked about it earlier. If I have real high confidence in what I have to offer and I take the time to really understand your situation, I should come into this conversation with a lot of confidence. And I should be able to steer. I don't want to say steer because that has a negative,
Yeah,
connotation.
let's avoid that word.
But I should be able to guide the conversation with a ton of confidence in a direction that I think will be beneficial to the person in front of me. But that takes really understanding them on a deeper level. And this is where the things we talked about earlier all come back together, because if I understand them on a deep level and I really feel good about my product and what I have to offer, then I can make sure that we see things the same way, and we kind of can get to a place of, hey, this makes sense or it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense, no one's offended. We can shake hands and either look for different solutions, or we can just, like you said, part as friends. And if it makes sense, then what are we waiting for? Let's move forward.
Let's do it, right? All right, let's switch into some positive ones because we've spent a lot of time on the negative, but I think that's human nature, right? We do that,
Amen.
right? So let's talk about conscientiousness. Now, say that 3 times fast.
I dare you.
Conscientiousness.
Yeah,
That's a tough. That's a tough word. It encapsulates a whole lot of things.
yeah, kudos for you for even going down this path, because I think that is a big one. That is a big one. That, we think about things of like responsibility, organization, dependability, adaptabilities, I think is in there as well. But really, it's about uh, being the person that you want others to see highly of, right? Think highly of. And I think, one of the things that we do that is a challenge sometimes, I think sometimes we put on a face of what we want people to think we are. And I think the focus needs to be on just being that person instead of putting on the mask of that person, just being that person. And that's where you're going to start to build up that dependability, the trustworthiness, the things that we all aspire to be. It's going to
Mhm.
happen naturally when we put ourselves in that position.
And I think it goes to your moral compass and
Yes.
having that strong moral compass to guide you and point you in the right direction and doing that thing that might be hard even when no one's looking. So, sometimes it's easier. I think this goes to, sometimes a buyer wants something and we tell them yes when we know, in fact, that's definitely not going to happen because again, we don't want to deal with the no's or, there's a lot of examples of this. So, when you have that certainty and that confidence in yourself and your moral compass, you're more likely to remain centered as you go through this. And so I think, yeah, that it's a very big word and a word that I think we don't address enough in this industry. Even though we have some fantastic, man, people who do this job, it's like you said, this is not for everybody. And those people who will stand up no matter what, I think that's key. The next one is something that I always say is that curious people make great salespeople.
Amen.
So,
Yes.
curiosity, let's talk about that and unpack it.
Yeah, this is me as a kid in a nutshell. Just, I used to be considered kind of a walking encyclopedia. Even to this day, listen, Kimberly, I know way too much about things that mean nothing. I have a ton of useless information in my brain because I was just so curious. I wanted to know how things worked, why things were the way they were. So when I get frustrated with my 9-year-old that asks 97 questions about everything, I reminded what my mom says, that's what I get, right? So but that curiosity is amazing because number one, not only is it going to build a deep well of knowledge and understanding in you, but I love the idea of, getting into the habit of asking a ton of questions, because great, really good salespeople know what they want to say and they practice what they want to say. And the great salespeople practice what they want to ask, and they
And
understand,
here, yeah.
yeah, they understand how to ask really great questions, because you're going to get a lot further with great questions than you are going to by having, the slickest pitch or the slickest presentation. It's about understanding how to ask questions, and that's going to guide, where you're going to go. So understanding that and really taking the ability to ask questions and taking that information to then inform how you move forward in your process, that is a high level. We talk about efficiency. That's the highest level of efficiency, is by the questions that I ask, they inform how I move through my process. Now we're getting to somewhere really quickly, really efficiently, and there's not a lot of strain on the buyer because they don't feel like they're being forced down this tunnel that they didn't want to go down, right?
No, and I think that's key, right? I think that's it. One of the highest compliments I've ever gotten was that you ask really good questions, and I'm like, thank you. I hope so. Because it's not that I come in and go, oh, I'm the smartest person in the room, right? It's that I can ask the questions so that whoever I'm dealing with, that I can help them more. Because if I don't have that understanding of them and I don't understand their wants and their needs, And it's like peeling an onion, I always say. So when I think I have enough information, I got to peel that onion a couple more layers till I get to that good, juicy, stinky part in the middle that makes you cry. That's where you want to be. So, and again, one of those things that we can unpack. But great salespeople are curious
Yes.
salespeople, and they don't just take things at surface level. They really have to get deeper.
Well, and I think as a little side caution, almost like a little asterisk, I think sometimes, especially salespeople that have been doing this for a while, a lot of times we start to see patterns. And what happens is sometimes we see what we think is a pattern and we go, oh, I know this story. And we start to go to the finish line. We go to the end of the book and we don't read the chapters in between. And sometimes, again, to your point, we need to slow down. Just because I've seen the beginning of this book doesn't mean it ends the same. So, making sure that I still maintain that curiosity, still ask the questions and don't ever assume that I know where this is going because we've all seen some twists and turns in some of these conversations that like,
And we
whoa,
know what happens when you assume.
that's right. We don't even need to
Yeah, we
say
don't
it.
want that. Absolutely. We did talk about empathy earlier, but I think that we can unpack a little bit more with the empathy. So
Yeah.
empathy can be both a positive and a negative, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. I think, we can dive, we talked about it before. We can dive a little too deep into the empathy and kind of live there with them. And that's a tough place to be productive from, is when we're living there with them. But I think as a piece of great information, I think the empathy, the ability to tap into the empathy, understand them on a deeper level, and help guide them through the fog is where we want to be. We don't want to be in the fog too, lost with them. And now we're all just wandering around, figuring out where to go next, right?
Right.
So I think
I
being
love
able
that.
to
That's a good
tap into it.
analogy. We don't want to wander aimlessly in the fog with them. I love it. Um, Optimism. I, glass half empty, right? Or glass half full. Like which is it? So eh, that may hit with the resilience that we talked about, that grit and resilience. But I think the ability to be a positive person is someone who can look for solutions.
Yeah,
If you're,
absolutely.
I always say you're gonna whatever you seek, you will find. So if you are seeking problems, you will find them. They're there. Trust me, there you can find problems anywhere. But if you're seeking solutions, it's a different scenario.
Yeah, I called somebody in my house a problem seeker, and I won't tell you who of my household it was, but I got in big trouble for saying it. But
I bet that probably didn't go over very
yeah, it didn't
well.
go well. But no, but I think there are, those times where we're just looking for problems. And guess what? If you're looking for a problem is going to find you. No doubt about it. But
Mhm.
I think, while we all know that we can be sometimes, insanely optimistic, probably overly optimistic. I think that's a better challenge than, I'm too optimistic, than I'm not optimistic at all, right? And we all know the opposite of that. And, for me personally, that has been one of the things that has gotten me through the tough times in what we do, right? And the tough markets and the tough communities and the tough, even seasons, even tough days, right? It's that optimism of, no, it's gonna get better. I'm gonna learn from this. I'm gonna grow. I'm gonna get to the next level. This is all part of a learning experience. I'm also, I'm one that likes to just take on challenges because I'm a little bit broken, Kimberly. So,
Yeah.
knowing that I wanted to make the shift into the training world from the sales floor, I volunteered for all the challenging communities. Put me there because I want to
Mhm.
learn. I want to know what it's like. If I'm going to talk about this at a high level, I need to experience selling next to a garbage dump. I need to experience selling next to train tracks and under power lines and all that fun stuff. I need to
Well, I had the
experience it.
trifecta. I had a community that had all three. So,
Oh man, look at you.
and I got it back multiple times. So, yeah, I was considered like I always said I was the Mikey of that company. So whenever somebody else would break it, they'd send me back in to fix it. And I'm like,
Go
all
fix
right,
it.
yeah, exactly. So with that optimism, we're not talking about wearing rose-colored glasses, right? So you still have to be realistic and see things that are happening, but when you are optimistic, you are looking again for those solutions through it and kind of find it fun. I bring me a challenge, man. I love it. So and that to me, that was a paradigm shift at some point in my life, and I don't know exactly where that hit, but I do know that it was a shift for me because it wasn't the way I always was, particularly. So it was definitely after I left home, and yeah, and things changed. Creativity now.
Ooh. Creativity.
That could be a couple of things too, right?
Creativity, that is, especially talking to my ADHD folks, that is right in the wheelhouse because I spend half my time dreaming about things that have nothing to do with what I'm doing right now in the moment. But that's where that creativity comes in. It's that ability to think outside of the box, it's that ability to see a path or a pattern that maybe someone else can't see. It's ability to say, that's an unconventional way of doing it, but I think it could work, right? It's being a little bit kind of tilted on your axis of saying that's never been done before, or that's a unique spin, but tie it with that optimism. I think I can make it work. I think we could do something with
Yeah.
this idea. And that's where you get presented with challenges and struggles, and you're able to see through it quickly because you can see kind of like infinite possibilities. When you have that curiosity muscle, that engine is going into overdrive, you can see all the possibilities of how to get around it. They're not all going to be winners, but you
No.
can you can at least
And
see the
sometimes it is
right.
truly, when sales aren't going well, it isn't always the truss is on backwards. Let's just turn it around. Like it's never
Yeah.
that black and white, right? So it is often that gray zone of, well, is it marketing? Is it leads? Did we have the wrong price product position? Usually somewhere in that vicinity, right? There's something. But we're committed. We're going down a path. So how do we get through that? And sometimes we do have to get really creative. And here's one. I'm going to be crazy. Going to go out on a limb here. How about we look outside our industry instead of just looking at what the competition is doing?
I love that. I love that.
I'm just
Something
saying.
something our industry is notoriously bad at doing. It's looking outside
Yeah.
of our industry.
And because we're at the top of the hour, I want to end on this one because I think it's so important to be goal oriented.
Yes.
That's sometimes, I get salespeople who get stuck on goals, but more often it's that they don't even know. They don't, how well am I doing? How am I doing against goal? What are those key performance indicators that are going to tell me how I'm going to hit goal?
Hmm.
And if you don't know this stuff, like it's freedom. Like it is your crystal ball.
So true. So true. So I in my superhero language, I call this my mission. What is my mission? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? And that can be a lot of different things. There's my big, over the top mission. I want to buy, a house for my family. And then there's my, I just want to get to this goal for the month, right? There's my mission, but it's always staying focused on the mission, I think is really important. In this case, staying focused on what the goal is. And this is what's going to lead us through when things go sideways, because we know they do when things don't go the way we planned, is being able to still keep an arm on or keep a hand on what the goal is, what the mission is, what we're chasing, what we're going after, and always stay focused. That's what's going to help us making sure that we prioritize all of our actions. I always ask this question: is what I'm doing today or in this moment, does that get me closer to my goal? Does it get me closer to the mission? If it doesn't, then I need to reevaluate why I'm doing this thing and if it's really mission critical, right? And if it's not, then we need to move it to the side. So I always want to make sure that I'm moving in a way that's going to get me closer to what that goal is, and also being willing to adjust my goals on the fly. I always like to adjust up because I'm an overachiever, but but being able to kind of move on the fly. And once we have that roadmap, that's when we're going to start to build momentum, and we're going to start to see, okay, we're getting closer to the goal. We're getting closer to the goal. It's like putting money in a vacation jar, right? Same concept. Is I can see
Right.
myself getting closer to it. I can see it happening, and that's going to keep driving me forward. When things don't go so great, I still see the mission. It's right there. We just got to keep stay forward.
Celebrate those wins, and not just big wins. Celebrate the little wins, and the rewarding that right behavior too. So if your company doesn't do that, celebrate it yourself. So
I love that.
because we need that. We need we get all dressed up in our Sunday best, or at least we used to get dressed in our Sunday best, and go out there and in a world that's going to tell us no 9 times out of 10, right? So as the late great Bill Herring used to tell me. So, that takes a lot of these things, these attributes that we have talked about. And if you identified with any of them, focus on how you can make that your superpower. So that's my challenge for you. Corey, thank you. Thank you for joining. And I think this was such a good, important conversation. And with all the chaos going on in the world today, it's easy to get lost in it. So we can refocus on ourselves and what control we have in this world.
I love that. And thank you for having me. I'm always excited to have this conversation about how we can bring the best version of us, not just to work, but to life every day. And part of that is this conversation is turning the things that could be perceived as weakness and understanding that they are strengths when we have the right mindset. So I'm so excited to be part of this conversation.
And we're back to mindset. Absolutely. Show notes will come out and the recordings give me a few days because, like I said, I am on the road. So, but those will come out to you guys. And thank you again for spending time with us. And if you're just if you're tuning into the recording, thank you for investing in yourself and listening to this. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either of us. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you
Bye
all.
bye.